Serial Entrepreneurship. Why we continue.
All right, hi everyone. Julie, Adrian, thanks for coming to the panel. I think we might be one of the only things between you and a happy hour, maybe, so we will try to be very interesting and exciting. I for sure have heard from a number of these guys already, yesterday and earlier, so I know it's going to be a great discussion. So this is about being a serial entrepreneur, and I love the why we continue. So we've had some great, pre-discussions on that, and I wanted to start, if you would answer this question and talk a little bit about your background and what you've done, because you all have very amazing backgrounds that I know the audience is going to want to hear about. What motivates you to continue? Like, you did one. What kept you going to do another? Did you fall into it? Did you pick it? Did it pick you? Give your background and then your answer.
Okay. Hi, thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Lloyd Diamond, currently the CEO of Pixium Vision. I spend time between France and California, so two beautiful places. I have about 30 years of experience in med device mostly. Large company, and then kind of migrated out to Silicon Valley, where I was involved in some disruptive technology startups that we built and sold to companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and others. I don't know, maybe unlike some of the other panelists, I got bitten by the bug later because I had started really in kind of more traditional conservative, large companies like Bristol Myers and Zimmer, very structured. And then I got my first taste at a company out in Silicon Valley called Kyphon that we sold to Medtronic for a lot of money that still today the people at Medtronic told me they way overpaid for. And I think it was that first experience, kind of the risk, the adrenaline, the failures, the successes, and then seeing how hard work pays off that really got me bitten by the startup bug. I would say that you probably have to be an eternal optimist and not even think about the risk so much, because if you think about how much you'll fail, you'd never start. So I would say maybe just from a personality perspective, a glutton for punishment and an internal optimist. That's why I do it. So.
Yeah, great intro. Mike Wallace, I'm a co-founder of a women's health company called Early Bird Medical, and I also run an incubator called 880 Medical. And I sold a company called Devora Medical about 1.5 years ago to Boston Scientific. So why do I keep doing it? It's a great question, and you're really kind of making us all go deep, because we're all not sure why we do why we do.
I was thinking we should ask their partners to submit a response to see if it matched up.
So I'm an engineer by training, and I just think it's super cool to kind of try to apply to, engineering principles and do product development to solve cool medical problems. And I always thought it was really fun, the synergies between an inventor and a physician, and kind of working through that. And so to me, it's just the cool factor of innovating and that process of doing something new and different. And of course, trying to get it to market, which is equally as fun.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is John Slump. I'm actually the CFO of Valletta Medical and also the co-founder of Atriverse. Startup companies are all I've ever known, and med device startup companies in particular. I started my first device company as a 20-year-old nobody out of Iowa, of all places.
Go Kansas.
I studied finance and accounting at University of Iowa. My sister was diagnosed with cancer. We learned healthcare workers who treating cancer patients with chemotherapy medications were getting very sick, and the workers were getting very sick. And so, I always tell people, look for real problems, real significant pain points people were willing to solve. But, for me, that's a big part of it. Being a there's an element of humanitarianism, or being a good shepherd of good technology, and there's no shortage of good technology out there, but there's a shortage and scarcity of good shepherds. So for me also, I like to think of myself as a builder, and building these companies is not for the faint of heart, but it's a lot of hard work, but it's also very rewarding. And then, frankly, for those who know me, I'm a bit of a fighter, not a lover, so I'll never shy away from a good fight. And the startups, there's a bit of a David and Goliath element to them. So I love a good underdog fight.
Yusuf.
Hello, everybody. So I see myself as an R&D engineer. So I was an early R&D engineer at Baylis Medical in Toronto, Canada, then Sadra Medical in Los Gatos area, California, and then Symetis in Geneva area. And all three companies were successful with exits to Boston Scientific. And then I co-founded, CEO of three companies. One is a company that is commercial now with a product that is FDA approved and CE marked and commercial pretty much everywhere around the world, called Anchor Orthopedics for back pain. And after that, I co-founded a company that did saliva diagnostics in order not to use blood, and I'll come back to that. And now I'm a CEO of a company in obesity. And for me, I see myself as an R&D engineer, and I would like to work on 4 fields before I do something else. So one is pain in general, so I did that. One is I just hate needles, so I did that with Abogen, so we were able to basically do some of the diagnostics with saliva versus blood. One is structural heart, and the last one, which I don't know if I'll get to it, but it's really dentistry. I hate dentists.
I love it. I love it.
Dear God, how do I follow that?
Sorry, Greg. Sorry.
My name is Greg Walters. I've done this 3 times. I'm on my 3rd. My first was a company called Kenzie Nash, and they're probably best known for inventing and commercializing the AngioSeal. And that was a real true startup environment. And I really mimicked that environment when I started up my next thing, which was Essential Medical. And I sold Essential Medical to Teleflex. Kenzie Nash exited to DSM. Essential Medical exited to Teleflex, and then I started Excision Medical, and that's we're making a device to do leaflet modification following TAVR implantations to allow secondary TAVR. And I think, in short, what I really most enjoy about why I'm doing it again is because I really like the environment, right? There's something about my personality, there's something about how I work, and the fact that I like to do so many different things that really, the startup environment has always been me. One of the things that made that really clear to me is our first startup became very big, and we became a bit of a plodding company, and I couldn't stand it, and ultimately left to start up my own. So I think, for me, the primary reason to do it is it's the funnest way to work, and I found that I'm quite good at all the things and like to do a little of all of them.
Yeah.
The CEO role is a bit tougher. So I like to get out of the CEO role and go back to my roots as a development engineer and spend time in the lab. So anyway,
we're going to talk about that in a minute. I think self-awareness is the key to recovery, right, in a lot of these situations, with knowing yourself and what you like and enjoy. So next we're going to go, Yusuf, I'm going to go back to you about, what was a failure? What went wrong? And trust me, guys, we're going to get to fundraising, but you have to stay for the whole talk to get to the fundraising at the end, okay? And we're going to try to put a new twist on it, too, than what you've heard all day. But talk about something that went wrong, a failure, a lesson learned. You said yesterday, I think it was it's like staring into the abyss and chewing on glass, I think was what you said. So that sounds like there's a lesson learned in there. So let's and then you guys can ping pong on who wants to go next.
So I can talk about Abogen, which is the diagnostic company. I did that out of just interest in the idea of using saliva versus blood for diagnostics. I just hate getting pricked. I was always the last to get the vaccine. I just hate having things stuck in my arms. And I did that with a friend of mine who had just finished his epigenetics PhD from McGill University. We did our bachelor together, but then he continued in his studies and went for a PhD in genetics and then postdoc in epigenetics. And the whole time, the whole 8 years was tough. I mean, we went to Sandy Hill Road, talked with everybody. At the time, Theranos was, the talk of the town. So, I mean, you had no chance whatsoever in raising money to try to do something around blood diagnostics with Theranos being around. So we ended up just going for a few doctors, and the whole time was an uphill battle. The whole time, until the end, until we were about to file 510K for the indication, and then we basically called a few people and tried to find somebody who can actually buy the company. So the whole time was tough.
I love it. Go
I was just going to rebound off that. It's interesting what you say, because, I don't know, yesterday in our session, I was talking about our current situation at Pixium, and One thing I think that's an important lesson is sometimes even the best technology doesn't win. You can't, there gets to a point where the tides are against you, the markets aren't right, there's been negative precedent. In this case, you talk about Theranos. In our case, we're in a neural implant for the retina, and there's been several that have come and failed. And even if you have the best technology, it could be a graveyard full of great technologies that don't make it. And as a CEO sometimes, that's the other thing. I talked about the internal optimist. You think you can will it to happen. And most times,
Just try hard enough.
you're right. And most times I think we can, but there will be some times where you just can't. Not that I want to be the downer here, but that's life. And you kind of need to know when you can and when it's time to pivot.
Knowing when to fail fast and move on. One other? Anybody else on that one? Good lesson learned?
Yeah, I would say I've been in the co-founder CFO role of half a dozen med device startups, and one of the things I learned is the painful lesson of hiring the wrong CEO. We're in particular when you're in your young 20s, have no experience, and there was a lot of pain and suffering and setbacks, and we were able to get it course corrected. But I think on the next one, when we went on, I think we nailed that from the get-go, from the beginning. And a little company called Ferropulse that we grew from the ground up as a first mover in the pulse field ablation space, and Boston Scientific acquired it for up to $800 million, and it was a very successful exit, and a big part of it was having the right CEO.
Shameless plug for Alvirium. That's one of the things we do. If you don't like the CEO we help put in, you throw them back and we give you a different one. So, this is one way to solve that, actually, the fractional approach, which a lot are doing. Okay, Mike and Greg. Oh, do you have another one?
Yeah, I've got a really quick one. So we had a major failure in a material selection that we learned right as we did our first major animal study implants, our long-term durable implants, and this was literally weeks after we closed our first round of priced funding. That delayed us then an entire year. And so that was a pretty tense time, but you just gut it out, and you put your optimism hat on, and you go do your engineering work and solve it. So, but no fun.
I love that. Yeah,
No
not fun.
That was an unfun part.
Unfun, the not fun part. So let's start here. We talked in the prep about being a reluctant CEO, which sometimes I am that as well. But this idea of a number of you came from the development side or the clinical side, and then got dragged kicking and screaming into the business side. So talk a little bit about that and what you learned and tips for others, because I know there's a lot.
You're looking at me because I'm the reluctant CEO. You know what? I just think it was, for me, it wasn't pursuing the CEO role as a role. I know there are people out there that just become CEOs because that's what they want to do, and that's the progression in their large company. And I just became it because it was needed in the company that I had founded. And I honestly had always assumed that somebody was going to take that role away. But it turned out I was I was at least okay enough at it, I guess, because nobody replaced me.
You were not wrong. You were not wrong.
I was not. Well, no, I was wrong quite a lot, honestly. So I think the truth is one of the things you get to do in a startup is do whatever's necessary, right? And I think that I did that, and I honestly enjoyed it. So.
You literally said you were cleaning the bathrooms at one point.
Yes. See, I think there's some really important things that other people aren't willing to do that you just have to set an example, and that turned out to be one of them. Yeah. Turns out guys are really messy.
I love it.
So, Greg's an awesome cleaner, it turns out, if you hire him at your house. So my story is kind of similar. I always just loved developing products. I started off in a big company at Boston Scientific earlier in my career. But my issue is always you could never move fast enough, and the company wouldn't take as much risks. Yeah. And if you work inside of a big company long enough, a lot of programs get canceled. They can't get them all the way to the finish line. Yep. So I just thought it was so sexy, so cool, so exciting. This idea that if you're in a nimble environment like a startup, you can actually take some cool technologies and get them to market. And that's, of course, where they happen. They don't happen in big companies, and the big companies need the startups to help with their product pipeline. But that was kind of my motivation. That's what it was appealing to me to startups, was the ability to be so agile and so nimble. Now, it turns out you need capital and cash to do that. And you need some leadership skills to do that too. And you've got to be able to spin a story to investors. But, you know, if you're excited enough about the opportunity, you can learn all that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and I don't know, there were those that came from the engineering world. I didn't. Yeah, I was kind of the reverse. I think we talked about this. So I came up through the commercial side. And early on in my career, I kind of, through an acquisition or a divestiture of Zimmer, the orthopedic company, I found myself in a situation with the acquirer where they were looking to create business units. And so, I don't know, one day I was in product management, sales, the commercial side, and the next day I had a cross-functional group I had to manage. So I needed to learn to speak engineering. Like I didn't quite get that. I mean, you know, we're the salesy people, we just kind of dream, and then the engineering people, they have to actually do something and put pencil to paper. But I think through that whole experience, you know, early on, you learn to kind of feed off of each other. And the one thing that I have to say about the engineers and kind of disruptive technology space, they have all this competence, but then they really dream with you. And you kind of you learn from that because they actually put it to practice. Yeah. So, anyway, different perspective.
If you get the right kind of engineers that can open their aperture. So go.
Like Lloyd, I'm a little bit more on the business side too. So you know, when it comes to a company like Farapulse, it was acquired before it ever even went commercial. That's, I think, a big difference between these Class 2 versus Class 3 devices. But most of my other experience has been Class 2, and for me, you know, in the CFO role, it's sort of hurry up and wait. You know, when are you guys going to have the product ready so we can start selling something? So.
I love it. And I think talk a little bit, because this is, I think, related, going from development to business, this making the pivot in the company from clinical medical to commercial. When and how do you know to do that? Maybe, you know, keep going, and then Yusuf will go down to you too on how do you know, you're the CFO, so how do you help the founder, owner, co-founder team figure out when it's time to make that pivot, and how challenging is that pivot?
Well, I think, again, in Class 2 devices, I mean, it's a little more natural. You have a 510K clearance, and, you know, now's time to, put the device into humans if you haven't already. But I think, you know, a big part of this answer is doing a limited market release. Really, if you're going to fail with the product, you know, fail in a pretty contained, small environment, so that you can iterate, redesign, and then try again. You know, I don't think you don't want to go really wide, really early, and fall on your face, because you can't recover from that.
Yusuf?
So I don't have experience in commercial. So the first company I co-founded, Anchor Orthopedics, we just before 510K, we brought a commercial team and a CEO. Second company, we sold it before, and right now we're just about to do our first in human, so no experience.
No, but maybe rebounding off what you said, it's an interesting point. I don't want to take us too far off task, but or off topic, but you know, many medical device companies, at least in the past, that's what we did. We built disruptive technologies. The cost of commercialization is high, so you build the technology and you sell it. The problem is the number of potential strategics that acquire in the space now have consolidated. Everybody up here said, who did you sell a company to? Boston. Everybody sold a company to Boston. Everybody sold a company to Medtronic. I mean, it's always the same names. I think there's a time where now the startup companies are going to have to figure out how to go it on their own. And I think we're at a stage now where it's quite complicated because the cost of capital is high. You can't find it. And yet the cost of commercialization is the biggest expense that a company will experience during its development. And so I kind of just wonder, very few people now probably that have been in for a while have had a lot of experience in commercializing disruptive technologies, because you didn't have to unless you were at a big strategic.
And you didn't also even necessarily have to start acting or looking like a commercial company because you were going to exit, right? And now possibly, I don't know, what do you guys think about that? Is that a trend that's coming?
I mean, I think if you, first of all, if your product is approved and it's working, you've done some cases, if you've done a clinical trial, you have data, if it's a 510K product or Class 2 product, you've demonstrated that it's working, you really have an obligation to launch it, right? Because not only to your current investors, but if you don't launch it, people are going to say, why haven't you launched it? And I've seen people come for pitches in my VC role, and they're like, well, we have this product, it's been approved, this one, that one. I'm like, well, why haven't you launched it? So you asked, like, when do you make that transition to launch the product? When you have a product approved and you've demonstrated in a small scale that it's working, you have an obligation to launch it, unless all of a sudden you have some crazy epiphany that the market really isn't there, which does happen. And then you pivot and you develop another product and you say, well, that was just a kind of a warmer-upper.
Love it. So, did you want to go?
Well, I was just going to say the best way to be acquired is to not need to be acquired, and the only way to not need to be acquired is to make sure you have a commercialization
and
plan.
be ready.
And so we did that. So at Essential Medical, this is a large bore closure device, arterial closure device. We called it Manta. It's the one that Teleflex picked it up. When Teleflex bought the business, a big reason they bought the business is because we had a clean room and an operation. We had FDA approval, ISO certifications, and we could build 75,000 devices a year, and that kind of blew their minds. So it was a real big aspect of selling the company to be ready for commercialization. And we had, we started up the curve, and luckily they stepped in early, but I think it was showing that was possible, made a big deal on the acquisition.
I was just going to say that. We're seeing that a lot with the companies, and I'm CEO of 2 biotechs that we're helping run. The more you have thought it through and you have a plan and you have a runway for where to go, that increases your valuation dramatically with a funder or a strategic even. If you've got, they might not use your plan, but if they can see it laid out.
Well, they changed all our plans.
Of course they will. Of
but
course.
Getting back to the topic that we're on, part of the commercialization, that was actually fun to do the commercialization piece, and it just gets back to one of the things that jazzes me about doing this again and again is there's all these phases. The early phase is fun. The middle phase is less fun than the early phase, and
for different reasons.
But commercialization turned out to be very, very fun.
It can be fun. Okay, we get one more, and then the funds, raising funds. So we talked a lot about, are you a disruptor or would you rather be a disruptor or a fast follower? Maybe we ask the audience too, who raise your hand if you are, prefer to be the first or a disruptor in the market. All right, we got a few. You guys can raise your hands too, which one you are. And then disruptor, raise your hands too. Disruptor, raising their hands, all right. And then fast follower. And then we got we decided on a new category of early fast follower. So now we're going to explain that. We're going to unpack that statement. That is cheating. That's not a multiple choice question.
Pick a side.
That's being smart.
Pick a side.
Go for it. Say why. Lloyd, we'll go down.
No, I'm a disrupt. And you said why.
The optimist.
Yeah, no, you said why, and I said, well, because the expectations are low. I mean, right? When you're first, people say, okay, you can fail.
The only way to go is up.
The only way to go is up. I know that might sound really ridiculous, but there's sort of there's a comfort in that.
A freedom in that.
Yeah, so I think I coined this term yesterday for the first time, the early fast follower.
You did, we should TM
coining
that.
is probably a little too braggadocious, but so my co-founder and I, we've done about 5 companies together, and our philosophy is to try to find exciting new areas and be a fast follower, but not like a 3rd or 4th or 5th, but be the 2nd, like number 2. And that means, and there's a little bit of risk there, maybe not as much risk as you, because sometimes the leader blows up and the market doesn't evolve, but at least you don't have to duke it out with 8 other competitors. And then it becomes, then if you're a good executor, if you can put a good team together, and you can execute, which we think we're pretty good at doing, then you can beat the others to market.
You can draft like a NASCAR.
You can draft.
You can draft. I like that. All right.
Yeah, I've kind of have experience with both, right? Farapulse was definitely the first mover in the pulse field ablation space and had a fantastic exit. Attune Medical was the first mover in the esophageal cooling space, and it, I think is had a lot of success and is now commercial and running 25 million plus in revenue a year and is profitable. But my latest startup where I'm a co-founder, Hverse, is a fast follower to Baylis, right? And I think Baylis also bought by Boston for 1.8 billion cash, or about 18 times revenues, a couple years ago. And I think there's really a lot to be said about both. So that's why I should have raised both my hands as well. It's good.
Yusuf.
We tried to be disruptive with the saliva diagnostic company, and it was really, really tough. So I don't have the courage nor the stamina to do it again. I'm just going to stick with being a fast follower.
Yeah, I think it's just easier to be a fast follower, so let's just leave it at that.
I love it.
There's no young people on here.
Drop
Maybe
the
the really
mic.
young
It's
people,
hard enough.
except you.
Yusuf is
It's
young.
hard enough to do everything, right? It's just, why make it harder?
Yeah,
But
it's true.
But I'm sure it is a passion thing, right? And so that's part of when you get into this, right? If you see something that really grabs you, then you're compelled. You must do it. And it probably wouldn't matter if it was early, fast, late follower, whatever.
Medium. Well, and then how important is it when you're a fast follower, early fast follower, for it to be dramatically, uniquely differentiated? Does that factor into the thinking?
Yeah, of course, you got to be differentiated, but just talking about being a disruptor versus a fast follower, if you decide to go be major disruptor from the beginning, remember, if you're going to be a CEO or you want to be a serial entrepreneur, it turns out you have to have a hit for someone to invest in you on the second. Now, there are successful CEOs, successful serial entrepreneurs who knows they had multiple gigs and they've never had an exit. But it's a lot harder. It's a lot easier if you can have some success, of course. And the more you do it, the better you'll also be for those tougher projects. So, if you're going to be a disruptor, my advice to the audience would be is maybe not do it as for your first company. Maybe do it for your.
I agree with that.
Pick your battles.
I agree exactly with that.
Pick your battles. That's brilliant. I like that ad. All right, our last 18 minutes, we're going to talk about raising funds. Now, I know that all of you have spoken on panels already and had sessions yesterday and drinks and cocktails with friends. What are the trends you're hearing at this conference about raising funds? And I know what you're going to say. We need some. There aren't any. So this is what we're talking about before. But given that, let's be real. Where are you landing on your best thoughts for people who want to get into this to be serial entrepreneurs? Therefore, they are going to be serial fundraisers, unfortunately or fortunately. What's your best piece of advice and the best thing you think they need to think about?
Yeah, maybe first I would say, this has always been true, but maybe most recently post-COVID, in the post-COVID world we like to talk. If you think you need X squared when it comes to funding. I think that's a big mistake a lot of first-time CEOs make. I did it. You think, I have money, and I can make do with this. I can say you'll never be enough. Now, I think the problem that we have today, at least from what I see on the side of somebody that's always looking to raise money, is that the bar is quite high now. So in device before, I think, you could take some steps, find some money, take some more steps and find some more money. I think now the bar is quite high. People want clinical evidence. They want to see that there's actually, that what you're trying to sell actually has merit. They want to understand that there's a market afterward for it. So I think the bar has gotten...
Later. The money's coming later now.
Yeah,
so back to our commercialization discussion, maybe that's a tip for the crew is, you might actually have to think more about planning for the runway. To show, because the money's going to wait and come a little bit later, and having that plan would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, early stage companies, as far as the bar being raised, before you used to be able to get funding from some VCs with, an invention, a crude prototype and a patent filed, right? And that for 95% of the VCs out there, that's not enough. More and more even want first-in-human data. So most of the early-stage startups, I think we're going to hear about this, they're getting their money from angels, right? The true you're really going to test your friend and family's network and angels. And most of these companies are being funded by them. And maybe you can go out, if the product is so cool, often the angels are physicians, right, in that space, get expert folks who believe in it. And that's really hard, right? It's really scrappy to have to go around and fill out your cap table with 20 angels. But that's often what I'm seeing for the early stage companies.
These doctorpreneurs, we call them doctorpreneurs or professorpreneurs. They're into it, and they're somewhat liquid, more than most.
So I've probably raised over 200 million from a handful of med device startups, and starting my first one in my young 20s. Who's crazy enough to give someone like me money? You know what I mean? It's going to be high net worth individuals who maybe resonate with the story about cancer or have been touched by cancer, or So I've actually funded multiple, 3 prior companies, all angel. 20 million, 23 million, 35 million. These cap tables burgeoned out to 220 shareholders. So I know how to raise funds in a really scrappy way. And part of what you got to understand is you can't do it yourself. You really need a team. And so the biggest advice I would tell entrepreneurs, in particular first-time entrepreneurs, is sometimes you need to get out of your own way. And it's not always the best idea to be the founder CEO. I realized that very early on, and I was maybe more of a self-proclaimed CFO, and now in my Volta role, I'm a recruited CFO. But that's the first thing I would say is, start with angels. You got to kiss a lot of frogs and try to build a team. And it's tough to crack what I call the chicken and the egg. How do you get the team without any money? How do you get the money without the team? And I think a big part of it is in a startup when you're really early. I call it the kind of the batshit crazy early days. You can give equity, and you got to sell your heart and soul to kind of woo a CEO or a board chairman or somebody who can be a conduit to the capital, because getting in front of the right audience is half the battle. Now, in the context of Volta, I would say, this is a bit of an anomaly. This is a pre-revenue company that is running an RCT but doesn't have the results yet. And we were fortunate that we were raising money last year. We were actually able to get 3 venture term sheets and raised a 36 million Series B led by Vinsana Capital. Shout out Vinsana. And I think that we were very fortunate, but those stories are, I think, fewer and farther between, especially this year.
A lot has been said, but I think take money wherever you can find it, as long as it's legitimate money. The only thing I don't do is friends and family. I don't do that myself.
Yeah, I think it's all been said, but it is, you go as far as you can on the angel money, make it last as long as you can. That seems easy to do, and everything's getting pushed back with priced rounds. And so you got to get as far as you can on the seed money.
We have any questions? Did somebody raise a hand? I thought I saw, question? Can we do that? I don't know if we can do that. I can come there. Just shout it out. I can hear you. Or okay. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks a lot. So I wanted to ask a little bit to what all of you said in terms of fundraising. Why have you, except I think Yusuf mentioned it, why not go fiscally conservative? Why not build on revenue build-outs? Do you always need to continuously raise funds? Why not have dividend-based investor lock-ins or FCC structures, right? None of you mentioned it. Why not is the question one. Second, sorry. The second one is that being serial entrepreneurs, you all have exits, hopefully good ones. Why not put that as the seed investment and grow without any external investment? Right? Why do you desperately need that? Why? That is one of the questions that I have always had with people I have invested in. And I don't see very revenue-focused outcomes, at least did not happen in the last 7 years.
2 quick responses. One, these are medical device companies that take millions of dollars just to be able to get to dollar revenue one. So you can't really bootstrap a med device company. And to your second point, I would not advise my best friend to put a disproportionate amount of their own wealth into their own company. I think all good things in diversification. So sure, you want to see a team with skin in the game, but should you put 90% of your wealth on betting green 00? I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah, and I would agree too. I mean, I think you manage your money like you would any portfolio. Before coming to Pixium, I invested my own money after an exit in a startup back in Silicon Valley, which has now since moved to Australia. I'm still a shareholder in that company. But you say, okay, you have this money. You're not going to put 100%. I wouldn't put 100% of my money into anything. You're going to spread. I would spread it like I would, and it doesn't mean you don't have conviction. It just means you're smart about how you invest your money. So.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so it's an interesting perspective. The reason why venture capital invests in this is because no one else historically would invest in this. So these are high risk, high reward opportunities. And then med device, unfortunately, is the redheaded stepchild to tech and biotech. Then we're the third as far as valuation goes, but it's still high risk stuff. And so I seed my entities, my co-founder and I, we seed our own stuff. But we don't put 30, 40, 50% of our net worth into our next company. We might put 5% in or something like that.
Yusuf, did you?
Yeah, I just so except Abogen, which is a saliva diagnostics and a 510K, everything else was a class 3 device. So you need 70, 80 million to be able to get to CE mark and to be able to generate your first dollar or euro. So it's a lot of money and years, and time is probably the most expensive commodity. It takes a lot of time.
Well, mine's a lot simpler. The first one, I didn't have the money to put in it. I put in $20,000 to start Essential Medical, and I wrote a patent with that, and so I didn't have anything. The second one, my wife isn't interested, and I'd really like to stay married.
That's the best answer, I think.
I mean,
actually.
sometimes you got to know what the right answer is. And
Absolutely. Back to self-awareness. Does anyone else have a question? I'll keep going, but anybody? It's hard for me to see. Oh, back there, we have a hand up. Well, I can barely see.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights here. On the fast follower kind of response, what's the distinction that you try to kind of go after being that fast follower? Is it form factor? Is it tech? Is it clinical ethics? Like, what do you try to go after to differentiate and distinguish?
Yeah, I mean, if you are second to a market, like think about more mature markets, for example, stenting in a coronary, right? There's like 20 competitors in there. So when you're second to market, you can differentiate. It is so easy to differentiate. The likelihood that the first product is going to be the best product is basically zero. So so basically you go out and you study that market, you talk to the users, you just say what's working well, what's not working well, and you can always improve on the being second to market or third to market. So it's easy pickings, especially if you have kind of an inventive background. But of course, you always want to try to improve the clinical outcomes, right, and the experience for the physician and the patient. So those are usually the two things you focus on.
Maybe one other perspective. I wouldn't think about it not necessarily only in clinical or in development or what have you, but there's also a way in which you can approach the market and the service you give to your customers. So I've spent most of my time in the surgical space. And in orthopedics, I'll just use that as an example. There are several competitors, and there's one that has not great products, but they have excellent service. And so they followed, somebody leads, they come up with a new technology, they follow with maybe a technology that's not as good, but if it's not working as well, they're always there to fix it. And so the hospitals say, we like that company because they're always
just
there
as
to
good
help us.
tech,
So there are different ways to follow, not necessarily in tangibles, but also in intangibles.
I would answer your question in the form of maybe a hierarchy. The best differentiators may be clinical outcome and or safety related. Maybe next it's efficiency, speed, throughput, workflow, form factor, and then maybe the bottom of the totem pole would be cost.
Love it. Oh, back there.
Good question.
Back
Yeah.
there.
One question might be the third rail for you very bright folks. There's a conversation about funds that are invested because the public market is stopped up. Those funds are not available to reinvest. Those funds were raised 7, 10, 12 years ago. They're at the end. So they weren't going to be returned to this market now. Similarly, there are funds that have been raised over the last 2, 3, 5 years that are not being deployed. And so, you're bright folks, what do you think it's going to take? What do you see relative to the global economy, to barometric pressure? What do you think is going to break this logjam of pent-up capital?
It's a great big finish question, isn't it? Okay, who's going?
The CFO guy.
Yeah, the CFO is going to answer for the group.
Yeah,
We've agreed that whatever he says
Yeah.
is right.
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Sorry to
Shitty
say.
answer.
I think when we were raising funds for Valletta, we specifically targeted funds that were in existence 3 years or less, so newer vintages. So first and foremost, you're right. Most of those later stage funds are going to be holding back capital for existing portfolio companies. I think for exciting deals with, in large growing markets and innovative technologies, the newer vintage funds have capital and they have to deploy it, and you better believe the LPs are all over them to do so.
Love it.
How do you find the funds which just raise the capital?
Networking. You can do a number of networking events and pitch events, but I think build a great board of directors, build a great advisory board. Get guys like this on your advisory board. You know what I mean? Fundraising is the quintessential networking game, and there's no website or portal where you can go and find them all. You need to network the old-fashioned way.
Anybody want to add to that, or is that a drop the mic answer? Drop the mic. All right. So I think thank you guys for everything. Unless there's anybody with a question, I think key takeaways. I love this. Be real, be cool, optimistic, and lean into the batshit crazy. I think that's the takeaway from today. Thanks, guys.